Morning, everyone. The committee will come to order so we can consider an issue that is, I think it's fair to say, near and dear to this senator's heart, and an issue that is very important and critical to not only the people of King Cove, but many throughout the state of Alaska. Today, we're going to be taking up the matter of continuing lack of reliable emergency medical transportation for the community of King Cove, Alaska, and how we can work together to protect the health and safety of these people. For those who are not familiar with King Cove, I'd ask that the Alaska map be just held up for just a second, just for situational awareness. Bring it over here, please. Just bring it right over here. Okay, so you have the community of Anchorage that's sitting right here. King Cove sits right here, can't see it right there, but right here at the end of the peninsula, just at the beginning of the Aleutian Islands. It's situated about 625 miles southwest of Anchorage, to put it into context there. It's about 250 miles from Kodiak, where our Coast Guard air station is. It is, when you think about proximity, 625 miles is one way to look at it, but given that there are no roads that connect it to anywhere else, the way that you get to somewhere else is you fly, and the cost of a round-trip ticket to Anchorage is $1,036. So if you're going to town, which we refer to Anchorage, for medical or for groceries or whatever the need may be, it's a $1,000 round-trip ticket. So far away, isolated, expensive. 85% of the residents are Alaska Native, Aleut, members of the federally recognized Agawadaway, and I always mispronounce that, Della, so you'll have to correct me. But as I mentioned, as with so many of our communities, it is reachable only by plane or by boat. It is a beautiful place, and I want to show the beautiful place picture now just to put the community in context. It's actually the same as we have over here. But as you can see, it is located right at sea level there, surrounded by two volcanic mountains. You approach the community of King Cove from the water side, but you come into very much a tunnel situation with high mountains on both sides of you. It is incredibly scenic on a beautiful day like we have in the picture, but the region is prone to quickly moving weather, high winds, low clouds, dense fog that sits in there, other conditions that can make flying and boating extremely dangerous. The small planes can land at King Cove's gravel airstrip. It's a 3,500-foot strip, so only small planes can come in and out. But as you're coming in and out, you've got these small planes that are dealing with low visibility, strong turbulence as the wind comes down off the top of the mountain, literally pushing an aircraft down, gale force crosswinds, which are notorious. And that's just in the air. If you're on the sea, mariners can be looking at seas that are 12-foot high seas and just very inhospitable conditions. Most of the time, if you're a local resident there, you don't have any desire to be flying when these weather conditions are just ugly and severe. But there are times when you can't avoid traveling. When you have a medical emergency, you've got no choice but to try to get to a medical hospital, and that hospital would be located in Anchorage. There is a clinic in King Cove, and they do a phenomenal job, I might add. They do a great job. But there are certain things that you can't do in a clinic. You don't have an anesthesiologist anywhere in the region, And so if you are a trauma victim, if you are a woman in early stages of labor, if you have any major illness, the clinic is not where you can receive your care. So what do? Well, the first step is to transport those who are sick or injured or in need of other medical care to the community of Cold Bay. You say, well, wait a minute, you just said transport them to Anchorage. Well, Anchorage is 625 miles away. The way to get them to safety is to take them to Cold Bay, where there is a 10,000-plus foot runway. The second longest runway in the state of Alaska is located just across the bay. So you've got King Cove that sits down here, and across the bay is Cold Bay, where you have your 10,000-plus foot runway. This is not only a runway that is accessible with better weather conditions. When I say that the weather is down in King Cove, it's down in King Cove over 1/3 of the year. Over 100 days a year, the King Cove Airport is not accessible. Not that it's just bad weather, it's not accessible. On the alternative, in Cold Bay, just across the bay, it's around 10 days a year that airport is shut down, that runway is inaccessible. So dramatically different in terms of its access. So since the 40s, really, the Alaska Native people of King Cove have sought safe, reliable access to reach Cold Bay during medical emergencies. Now, Cold Bay is a community that came about in World War II as that airport, basically, for air traffic in and out as we accessed the Aleutians. It was literally built for its airport. Today, there's less than 100 people that live in Cold Bay. They're mostly federal or state employees. In the community of King Cove, a community of close to 1,000 people, somewhere between 900 and 1,000 people. This is a community that's been there for maybe 4,000 years or so. This is where the Native people have been for millennia. So again, as we are searching for those avenues to provide for a safe route to medical care, or just to access the rest of the state, the answer is not to build a longer runway in King Cove. You will still be faced with the geography around you and the weather around you. A longer runway would simply expose both pilots and their passengers, again, to some of the worst flying conditions in the country. And I think you'll hear some of that testimony this morning. The answer is not to buy a large ferry and construct new docks at both King Cove and Cold Bay, because it's not appropriate to expect injured patients and their doctors to suffer through a multi-hour-long trip in rough seas, or perhaps be shut out by the ice that comes into the bay. The answer is not a new helicopter, which would be too dangerous to fly in most conditions, and also just too expensive to operate. The answer also is not a hovercraft. This has been tried, it has failed, it couldn't operate when it was needed most, when the weather was most foul, and simply cost too much to maintain. And the answer also is not the U.S. Coast Guard. As much as we love and support our Coast Guard, being a medevac to a community is not part of their overall mission, although they will come when called, and they have. And you will again hear testimony to that fact, that we continue to have our Coast Guard men and women put their lives on the line, and do so willingly. But these rescues are not part of their core mission. They're not safe for anyone, and they're enormously expensive for the U.S. taxpayer. It's estimated one of these, when the Coast Guard has to come in for a medevac, it can be $200,000, $250,000. That's not an efficient use of the taxpayer dollars. So the right answer really is to do what virtually every other community in America would do, and that's to build a simple life-saving road, a connector road. In this case, it is building an 11-mile, one-lane gravel non-commercial use road. And I say that so many times I can say it in my sleep, an 11-mile, one-lane gravel non-commercial use road to connect the existing road from King Cove through the Eisenbeck area and to the connector road that allows access into Cold Bay. We already have about 19 miles of existing roads that have been built outside King Cove and Cold Bay. Now you might say, and you'll hear, that the area within the refuge is untrammeled wilderness. Well, it may have been untrammeled wilderness prior to World War II, but during the war, there were roads built. There's over 50 miles of roads that are contained within the refuge area. Currently. And you might ask, well, are those roads being used at all? Well, they are being used by our fish and wildlife folks. They're being used by hunters. So the question then is, why haven't we been able to get this simple road built? And the reason is we can't get permission from our own federal government to do so, because this life-saving road will cross a small corner of the Eisenbeck National Wildlife Refuge that is designated as federal wilderness. But I will tell you that we have routinely allowed for what they call these cherry stem roads, effectively to allow for a transit to move through these wilderness areas. We have done it before here. And the only difference that we would see here is that cherry stemming would actually cure an injustice, which is keeping these people from accessing their road rather than preventing one, as we try to do oftentimes when we're designating wilderness. We have within this committee passed legislation. It was overwhelmingly approved by Congress. President Obama signed it into law back in 2009, and it would have allowed the Department of Interior to approve a road for King Cove. It was a really lopsided deal, let me tell you. It was not the best deal for the state of Alaska or for the people of King Cove. It was a 300-to-1 exchange. The federal government was going to get 300 times more than what the state of Alaska was giving up and what the native people gave up. Their lands that they received at settlement under ANCSA, they were willing to give up a portion of that. And the exchange was going to be 206 acres that we would need for the corridor in exchange for 61,000 acres of state lands and native lands. And 300-to-1 was still not good enough. And Secretary Jewell rejected that offer. She did so on the day before Christmas Eve. I don't forget that Christmas. She decided that just using 0.07% of the refuge as a cherry stem to help save the lives of the people who lived there, while simultaneously expanding the refuge by tens of thousands of acres, that somehow or other that just wasn't worth it. It just wasn't worth it, she said. And she came with me out to King Cove, and she listened to the people of King Cove. And I was there, and I heard the exchanges back and forth. I heard what the people said to her. I heard what the children said at the school assembly when they told her that they were frightened to fly because their auntie had died, or their grandma had died, or they had a neighbor who had been in a crash. And the secretary stated that she had listened to their stories, but she also needed to listen to the animals. And that's what drives me with this, because we have a responsibility to the people that we represent. And we have a responsibility for the land as well, and we don't take that lightly. But think about the people that live out there, and you'll hear testimony from Stanley Mack, whose families have lived there forever, and Della Trumbull, whose families have lived there forever. And you ask them about how they care for the land, how they care for the animals, how they have been stewards as the Aleut people of the land. So I'm not too worried about making sure that the animals are taken care of, because I know that the Native people have done that for generations. The other irony here is again, this decision was made despite the fact that there are roads existing within the refuge. They've been there since World War II. No lasting impacts on any species that lives there as a consequence of those roads that were being built. And again, if the decision was made to protect the birds, it is a little bit ironic that on Fish and Wildlife's website, they boast about the recreational hunting for the waterfowl that is in the area, and the brant that we are supposedly protecting are available for hunting. So it's one of those issues that you look at and you say there's so many ironies here that it just isn't right. This decision was made despite the fact that there are already countless roads in refuges across the country. State of Alaska has pointed out in testimony before, we've got roads in refuges in Florida, Maryland, Texas, Louisiana, North Carolina, Arizona, Montana, Missouri, Illinois, New Mexico, Nevada, Washington. So this is not unprecedented. And again, you'll hear testimony from the folks here today. Interior's decision ignored the fact that human lives have been lost in King Cove. 19 people dead. 19 people dead since 1980, either in plane crashes or because the sick and injured couldn't get out in time. The decision that Interior has made is cynical. I think it's callous. It devastated the people of King Cove, who truly believed that help was finally on its way. It shattered the trust responsibility that the federal government is supposed to have to our nation's Native people. And it's left the people of King Cove in essentially the same position that they have been for decades, which is at the mercy of the elements, left to suffer pain, anxiety, sometimes even death in the event of a medical emergency. King Cove has now seen 42 medevacs since the Secretary rejected this proposal back in December of 2013. U.S. Coast Guard has been called in on 16 of those medevacs, risking the lives of their crew and others. Patients have suffered terrible pain and trauma. There was a man, a fisherman, who dislocated both hips when a 600-pound crab pot fell on him. We've seen elderly residents who have struggled with internal bleeding or sepsis or heart attacks. An infant boy who couldn't breathe. The stories just go on and on and on. So we are holding this hearing this morning to ensure that the people of King Cove finally have an opportunity, again, to state their case on the record as to why they need reliable access to emergency medical transportation, something that virtually every other American community has, without ever stopping to think how important, how valuable it is. And I will remind people, King Cove is a long, long way away. And most people in this country will never have an opportunity to get there. But as remote as they are and as far away as they are and as small as this community is, it's still an American community. And they're not asking for much. So this is an opportunity to hear directly from those in need, to let them make their case in their own words, to those who hold the power to help them. And while we will be respectful of everyone's viewpoint expressed today, it is clear that the best answer and the only answer, and the answer that should have been chosen a long time ago, is the life-saving road. This issue has gone on for decades for the people of King Cove. It may be new to some colleagues here, and I thank you for listening and for your concern. I think you would share my concern that if people in your states were faced with an issue such as this, where there was an alternative, and you will hear the argument that, well, Alaska's difficult, and there's weather all over, and stuff happens. And so, because it happens in other places, King Cove should be no different. But the difference with King Cove is there is an answer that lies 11 miles away, the second longest runway in the state of Alaska. And they can get there if they have 11-mile connector road. That's the difference between the situation in King Cove and some of the other places where it's tough, it's hard. But I'm not going to sit back and just hope that we don't have any more emergencies during bad weather, because hope is not a policy. And I'm going to make sure that the people of King Cove are heard. So again, I thank you for enduring my longer opening statement, but as you can tell, when it comes to helping protect human lives and preventing needless human suffering, I'm going to do what I can. With that, I'd ask my colleague, Senator Cantwell, to make her comments, and I appreciate her being here this morning. Thank you.